redistricting reform is directly addressed in Delegate Carr's proposed amendment and in several of the others. And we think indirectly addressed as well as Delegate Landy's, which is the premise that political boundaries are going to be adhered to the greatest extent possible, county, city, town, and precinct lines. We think it's important that communities are kept as whole as possible, and we appreciate the delegates for bringing these constitutional amendments forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Doug Miller for a question.
Susan, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
This is something I actually raised when I was on city council, not before I even got in the state legislature. The city of Manassas has always never been big enough to have, to have a delegate that covers the entire city and then part of Prince William County. When I was on city council, part of our legislative package was that you keep the city of Manassas whole. You don't split it up between two delegates. When I was on city council, even my argument was, why? Shouldn't we want two delegates representing us in Richmond? And my argument was, shouldn't we split the city of Manassas in two? I mean, what if you get a delegate that goes to Richmond and just basically sucks? I mean, or what if you want two really good representatives? And I never understood that argument as to why, especially when you get small cities or rural counties that really demand having just one delegate. Has the other side of that coin ever even been debated within BMO?
Yes, it has, and there will be some jurisdictions that like having at least a piece of another delegate or senator.
Right.
I think what is difficult for us is egregious splitting up of jurisdictions. In testimony 2 years ago and last year, we specifically mentioned Front Royal, which is a town of 14,000 and is split into 3 districts. The town of Blacksburg is split into 3 House districts. And if there is a community voice that is from the town government, and it's diluted, I guess, among the various delegates, it's just difficult for the interest of that community as expressed to their councils to be heard if they aren't really a significant part of the district. So yes, sometimes it could be helpful to have more than one delegate or one senator, but it's not necessarily helpful to be so divided that you lose any kind of voice. Another issue
Or you have
is,
more voices.
well, if anyone's listening, but it is there's a two-edged. I think like in everything, there's nothing that is black and white. But the other issue in terms of the split precincts is that
I agree on split precincts.
Yeah,
split precincts are just a nightmare.
we need to make our election administration easier.
Couldn't agree more on that. I'm just talking about split localities. Like again, and this is before I even got in the legislature.
Yes, sir, I understand.
My point was I wanted 2 delegates representing the city of Manassas, not just one.
Would you want 4? I mean, if you look at, say, the city of Norfolk and the,
If we had 4, I think we'd have more voice in Richmond.
Doug Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now since she's asking the questions, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I would tell her, yeah. I mean, my experience here for legislators that are gonna listen to their local governments, it doesn't matter how much percentage they're in their district. They want to please their district, and their constituents as best they can, as long as it doesn't go against what their personal will is or what their strong held beliefs might be.
Thank you. Do you have any further questions, Doug Miller?
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that.
That's okay. We just can't have questions from the podium to the dais. Kind of messes up our flow. But I know he's free to answer your questions or ask questions of you.
No, she answered my questions very well.
Okay,
It was
very good.
not
Thank you for being here.
I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. My name is Andrea McClellan. I'm from the city of Norfolk. I actually sit on Norfolk City Council. I'm here representing One Virginia 2021. And to the gentleman's comment, Norfolk has 9 representatives here at the state. We have 7 delegates and we have 2 senators. I have a great delegate, Delegate James, but he represents about 3 blocks in Norfolk. And while I think he has a great voice, I don't think he spends a lot of time in our fair city as a result. So So without a doubt, I would like to have more compact districts, definitely not split districts either. I believe the number's gone from 75 a decade ago to 224 or something along those lines now. So definitely support Delegate Landis's amendment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for coming up here from Norfolk. Any additional members of the public to speak with us about Delegate Carr's bill? Delegate Carr, I recognize you for last word, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate being here. Thank you again for your hearing of this, and look forward to see whatever you're going to move forward.
Yes, Delegate Hugo, question to patron.
To Delegate Carr's bill, and actually all of them, and I heard Delegate Landis earlier say he thought it was the prerogative of the General Assembly to draw these lines. But with all of these bills, the evolution will be, you've got all these bills, Landis, and I think Delegate Price and others, political party, incumbent members, you're injecting additional criteria, subjective criteria to the process. So I think what's going to happen if any of these bills get introduced or passed, such as Delegate Landis or others, you are inviting a litigation beyond belief. I mean, because it's in, potential candidate, political favoritisms in the eye of the beholder, and you're going to end up with a commission. So I'm just saying for our members, if you vote for one thinking that it's going to be, this is the way it'll be, the logical end result will be what Delegate Carr has a commission, because I think you're just going to end up with endless litigation and some of these other ideas that are out there. So I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm just saying that's the way I see this whole thing evolving.
Thank you, Delegate Hugo. Thank you very much, Delegate Carr. We appreciate you being here. Keeping on the redistricting mode, I want to recognize Delegate Plum. Delegate Plum, thank you for waiting around. We are on the redistricting portion of our docket, and you have filed HJ 628. Good morning, Delegate Plum. Tell us about your bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to just create a little bit of context, if I could, for the bill and how it is that I'm here. I believe I'm the only member now serving who has been through Democratic redistricting and Republican redistricting. And I want to say to you, the circumstances are the same. I watched Democrats with declining power in Virginia slice and dice jurisdictions in order to create safe districts for themselves or for others. That's human nature, that's political nature. I was so concerned about the process when I came here and watched it evolve for the 1981 redistricting, and which incidentally I started in 1978. I was in a term and then I was out, and I came back in a 5-member multi-member district. That was the way they did in the old days. Couldn't figure out how to cut the lines, so they made multi-member districts. So I came back as a 5-member district. The court threw that out, so I ran in 82 in a 3-member district. Court threw that out, so I ran in 83 in a single-member district. The point being is that we have a built-in self-interest that we have difficulty overcoming. In fact, I would suggest to you we can't overcome it. And so that's why in 1982, I introduced this bill. Same bill as before you today.
1982.
82. And my statement that I want to make is simply this. You can put all the language you want in the code about how we're going to be fair and take into account this factor and that factor and so on. But if you turn back the responsibility to us directly to do directly, you're going to end up with the same kind of situation that we have today, where we have, again, a slice and dice smaller localities. Now, localities are going to get divided. There's no way mathematically that it works out nicely that House and Senate member districts are going to equal the size of smaller jurisdictions. But what you can do is you can start off with an assumption that what we're going to do is to draw lines along communities of interest. And communities of interest will recognize political jurisdictional boundaries, but they will also recognize that to make those districts smaller or larger, you can take into account the whole of the communities of interest. So it suggests to you, for example, in Manassas, Prince William area, you can find communities of interest that might go beyond the jurisdictional boundaries, that make for a district that is compact and focus then on the interest and needs of the people who live there. Now, the notion then that, well, gee whiz, you might lose if you now have in some of the towns now where you have 2 or 3 delegates, you might lose some representation. I would suggest to you gain representation. What happens when a district is divided into several representatives? Nobody has the responsibility. It's always, well, I thought somebody else was gonna do it kind of thing. And a jurisdiction gains in power when it's served by a single member. Now, how to go about doing this? You've got a proposal that I have before you that takes into account the current power structure in naming people to an independent commission, and those 12 members come up with a 13th member, and a way when they can't come up with that 13th member, how that person would be arrived at. That would create your district boundaries that could go out to the public, could go to be known generally before a final adoption by the legislature. The final adoption of the lines would be by the legislature. But what we have is what we need is a work product that takes into account the various factors that we may tend to overlook in our zeal to protect our districts. And so I would suggest to you this independent look to create the document that we can go forward with public participation will give us fair representation. I know there's a lot of interest in this subject. In fact, I am astonished at the range of people who now have suddenly called on the fact that part of the problem is the way the districts are drawn creates a focus on the political parties and their party goals rather than maybe the general goodwill. But I don't want us to take a simple way out. Don't come up with a bunch of fancy words to say we're not going to take into account politics, etc. Create a process that ensures we don't do those things. Because again, I suggest to you that I cannot, and you cannot, no disrespect intended, nor can members of the legislature do that fully objectively. So we need to have somebody independently do it for us. I'm not pressing my formula. It's been around a long time. As a matter of fact, as history has evolved, I've seen some formulas I might like even more. The reason I keep this one before us is to say that we do need to have a process. It needs to be an independent process. We need to rise above our self-interest. And frankly, you represent your people right. You stand for what's good. You do your constituent service and so on. You're going to get reelected. Don't hide behind an artificially contrived district that political history might say to you would be safer for you to run in. So, Mr. Chairman, I introduced this bill just so I can make that speech. But I want to say to you, please, pass one of these bills out or recognize the importance of what we're talking about here today. And the importance is such that the 10 or 12 members of this subcommittee should not make the final decision on it. As you think about your decision, keep in mind that the Rules Committee has a rule whereby it can, without recommendation, send the bill to the floor of the House of Delegates. So I would plead with you, please, to figure out among yourselves, among these various bills, the bill that you'd most be supportive of. Ask the Speaker to take that bill to the Rules Committee, and the Rules Committee submit it to the floor for a vote. Then we will have a consensus on the part of the legislature as to how this ought to be done. Not by 10 or 12 members holding up the general will, but in fact sending it to the floor for a vote. So that would be my plea.
Well, thank you, Dr. Plum. The fact you've got a #1 numeral on your license plate means you've got a best edition of history, and we appreciate you sharing some of the history going back to the 1980s, 1970s. So we appreciate you being here to tell us about your bill and also a little bit of Virginia history.
Mr. Chairman, if you had more time in the committee, I could tell you more stories.
There you go. Thank you, Delegate Plum. Really appreciate it. Delegate Price, you have a bill on this subject. Would you mind if you hold that in advance and let some of our colleagues who have been waiting around, you may be batting cleanup today, Delegate Price. Okay, with the exception of Delegate Price's bill, which is one that deals with redistricting, we have John Bell. Delegate Bell, you have a bill also in our redistricting subcategory. Thank you for your patience and waiting for us to get through our docket. Tell us about your bill, which is HJ 749.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Very interesting discussion this morning. My bill is on redistricting. I also support Delegate Landis' bill. I think it's a good step forward to make the intent that we we're against partisan redistricting. However, I think where it falls short is it doesn't provide a specific method for how it will be done. And some of the discussions, I agree with my mentor and colleague, Delegate Plum, that frankly both parties around the country and in history have been guilty of gerrymandering, and frankly I don't trust either party with this very sacred duty. I think it's a huge threat to our democracy. So the method I'm proposing is a method of math, using math to do redistricting with a redistricting commission. I have a handout which I'll pass.
You can give it to our clerk, and she'll pass it out, or give one to the chair, and our clerk will pass out the rest. And you're getting into some, not algebra, but basic arithmetic. But take us through your math, if you would.
Basically, this is an algorithm, and it does most of the work for redistricting just by math. There's a website which I reference, I believe it's on that paper, rangevoting.org, which actually has some really cool congressional districts and ways that you can see this in work. But what it does is it takes the number of districts that you're seeking, the population, and it divides it up. So it will take, say, for instance, the map of Virginia, divide it on the shortest straight line that you could split the two, and then we'll keep using that method subsequently until you get the desired number of districts. Then there will be a commission, 10-person commission, and in the bill, it provides how that commission will be formed. It's empowered to make minor adjustments. One of the shortfalls, frankly, I think the only shortfall of this method, the method has many advantages in one that with just the use of simple math, makes the divisions, and it's very quick, it's very cost effective. However, it doesn't take into consideration things like rivers or mountain ranges. It doesn't take into consideration county or city borders, what we discussed before. So the commission would be empowered to make minor adjustments for those cases where it would be best to adjust the district around either geography or other things that could be impediments to compactness and to ease voting. Again, it's a pretty simple method, and the commission actually solves that method. In the original submission, I will tell you there was an error, and we put in an amendment for that, which deletes lines 42 to 56, which were repetitive in the bill. It's saying first to be nonpartisan, then it actually had very partisan appointments. So that amendment actually corrects that error.
Even though we're not going to be voting on these bills, and we do sub quorum, it's probably appropriate that we have the line amendments for the substitutes. So there's a motion that we bring forward the line amendments plural, Delegate Bell's HJ 749 before the committee. Motion. Motion made by Doug Price, is there a second? Second, Marius, okay. The line amendments are now before us. Again, no votes today, but we've got the proper bill you want before the committee. Delegate Bell, if you would either wrap up or...
I'll wrap up by, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I also would encourage you in the vast amounts of free time that all of us have. A 2-minute video on Google, if you go to YouTube, in shortest straight line, and it explains this much more eloquently with pictorials. But I think it is a very fair method. And again, it's a method of math with intervention to correct known errors or geographic disparities.
Bell, I realize I didn't call for a vote. I'm bringing this forward. All in favor of these line amendments, indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We're going to get that done for the record. Delegate Bell, thank you for your time. Again, no votes today, but the record remains open, and we will go to this website to get more information.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members of the committee, we're doing pretty well. We've got 15 more minutes in this room. We should be able to get through our docket. Delegate Rasool, Delegate sits on deck, to use a Washington National term. HJ 541, back to our Lexington voter registration subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HJ 541 establishes a voter-nominated primary election process, very similar to Delegate Cole's HJ 635. I know he's not here to speak on that. Also known as a top two, what this will allow is a more competitive election process. In an election in 2015 where all 122 incumbents were re-elected in the general election, I think finding more innovative ways of getting more people involved and giving more choice is a good thing. What happens in a voter-nominated primary election, as they have in Nebraska, Louisiana, California, and Washington State, all candidates that want to run for a particular office, they all go into one primary, and in that one primary, the top 2 vote getters go on to the general election, regardless of party affiliation. For the practical piece of this is that once someone is elected, I believe because more of us are then accountable to the general electorate, then it encourages us to find compromise and to work away from the gridlock that we see, for example, in particular in Washington, not so much in Richmond, but we certainly could be heading down a better path than we are right now. So the only difference, just for clarification, between my HJ 541 and Delegate Cole's HJ 635, if I'm not mistaken, Council, is that mine includes the General Assembly, where his does not, just because of the statewide elections.
Thank you, Douglas. So let me throw a question at you. I'd like your response. If your bill were to become part of our Constitution to go forward, you could have, such as they have in San Francisco, a generation of voters who never see a candidate with an R after the name, or a generation of voters in Oklahoma who never see a person with a D after the name. Any problem with that as you see it?
Mr. Chairman, great question. This does not preclude people, parties from endorsing certain candidates or from multiple candidates having Ds or Rs or Ls or Gs, whatever they may be, next to their name. So this does not eradicate the party affiliation. What this does say is that you would have a large public primary where the voters would do the nominating for the top two to go on to the general election. So this is really about empowering the people. And so you definitely, hopefully, would be able to have that choice moving forward.
So follow through, if I can understand, let's pick on San Francisco, that there is, which currently has something like this, a California law, that if there was a Republican who lives in the city of San Francisco and wants to run for city council, whatever, or California State House, they might not make the top two, so they're on the general, but they would seek to run as an independent with an R after the name in the November election? Is that how it would work?
No, they would not be able to run in the November election. The November election would be the only two individuals that would be able to move forward in the November election would be the top two from the voter-nominated primary. So everyone that wants to run in the voter-nominated primary, if it's all Republicans or all Democrats or some mix of independents, libertarians, Greens, etc., doesn't matter. Let the voters truly decide who the top two choices are that then go on to the general election. And the practical matter here is, Mr. Chairman, is once we get here to the General Assembly or to our elected office, instead of, and I know as many people do, agonize over what our specific primary electorate is going to think about every single vote that we take, now we can really try to shift focus, hold true to our values, but really try to take into account what does the majority of the electorate really think. And I know many times some of us can struggle with that. So what we're trying to do is to alleviate that issue that we have.
Thank you, Douglas. Any questions? Douglas Hill from many members of the committee. Any members of the public for brief statements concerning this bill? Yes, sir. Recognize you from the Registrar Association.
Yes, and thank the delegate and Chairman Cole for bringing that. We don't take a position on it. I just want to share to all parties concerned that the logistics to implement this, if this is one of the ones that you choose to push forward, already exists. The election equipment that's in every precinct in Virginia, 2,500 of them, is capable of this type of vote gathering, reporting, tabulating, and then sending on to the State Board of Elections for canvassing statewide. That technology already exists. You would have, from time to time, depending on whether it was a odd year or even year, you would have a slight increase to the cost at the local level, depending on the complexity of the ballot. Because once you open it up to where there might be 10 people running for Senate District 28 instead of 2 or 3, then the ballot forms get longer, slightly more complicated. You may end up with 17-inch ballots instead of 11-inch ballots, things like that, which is a slight increase at the local level upon implementing this. But the technology exists. It's already in place if this is the direction that the Assembly chooses to go.
Thank you. Any summation, Delegate O'Toole? closing comments to the board?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I hate to be over dramatic about this, but, you know, imagine a democracy where today, really the majority of the electorate is, with regards to, for example, the General Assembly, do not feel as though their vote really matters, for a variety of reasons, many of which have been articulated today. But now we are truly going to be empowering people from all walks of life, and I speak on behalf of, also as a millennial voter, trying to shed these labels and really focus more on the content of the character of the individuals we're trying to bring to power. This, could be really a transformational step for Virginia moving forward.
We appreciate that, Douglas Hill. Thank you for being here. Thanks for waiting around.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Chairman.
the record remains open, so grab any of us when we talk about your bill, and most likely we'll be voting these 1 week from today.
Thank you.
Delegate Sickles, thank you for your patience, for waiting around here. You have brought HJ 538 in our other category, dealing with the marriage amendment in our Constitution. Recognize you. Tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This should be an easy one. It should be the top of your list when you pick your 4 or 5 that go on the ballot, because this provision of our Constitution is unconstitutional, and that should, on its face, be the reason we would want to get it out as soon as possible. I would also ask you to read what's in our Constitution now. It's really very offensive to so many people. There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of activity and political developments and with regard to this issue over the last few years, and the economics of being exclusionary, of having language like this in our code is kind of well known. We know what's happening just south of our border here. You know, we have a strong tourist economy. It approached $23 billion last year. It directly supports 222,000 jobs. We want that to grow. This is not a way, this will not help us grow to have language like this that's so harsh in our Constitution. We have thousands of Virginians that have been able to pursue happiness in their lives, like 6,600 to date that we know of. There's probably a lot more than that in Northern Virginia, because people have been able to get married in DC and Maryland longer than they have been in Virginia. And it's in their pursuit of happiness, it allows them to have stability, legal assurances, inclusion in the American dream. They undertake obligations and responsibilities that come with commitment under our civil law. Nationwide, there's 491,000 couples, and no one else's marriage has been hurt. I hope none of yours marriages have been hurt by this, since other people have had a little bit more freedom since this has become law in 2014. I mean, it's really about freedom and the pursuit of happiness, because there's nothing. If you don't believe in the two people of the same sex, you get married, make a commitment, just don't do it. I mean, there's no gun to your head. But, you know, you get your choice here. If you want to make a commitment and you know, solidify your legal position in this world, you can do it. If you don't want to do that, no one is going to make you do that. So, you know, 2006 was the year that we put this on the ballot. 57% of Virginians voted for it. I think the more notable point to make is in 2006, 43% of Virginians voted against it. So by the time this would get on the ballot in 2018, we have another maybe 1.2 million people who have become of voter age who don't want this, in our Constitution, even though it's unconstitutional. And they need a chance to go and remove this language. I don't know what's so special about the 2006, the rest of eternity. Virginians should live with language like this in their Constitution, even though it's unconstitutional. So this is a really easy one. All you have to do is strike this language and put it on the ballot to see whether people approve or not. I think we all know what would happen. I think that's why people will stand up and oppose it right now. They know what the voters would think of this. And so I just ask you to do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sickler. We appreciate your waiting around and your good testimony. Any members of the committee who have questions for Delegate Sickles? we've lost quorum, but we're going to keep on taking testimony because there'll be no votes today. If you would, please come forward, sir. Thank you for waiting around to speak on this bill, and introduce yourself and tell us about what you thought of this bill.
Good morning, Chairman. James Parrish with the College of Virginia. Just on behalf of the more than 6,000 gay and lesbian loving couples that have married since we got the freedom to marry about 2 years ago in this Commonwealth, and the thousands of others who unfortunately had to travel outside of our Commonwealth to get married and have their relationship recognized, I would ask for the committee to move this bill forward, as we need to have a constitution that respects all of our citizens and that we can live with, and just so that their relationships, the full dignity that they have, that they aren't living in a Commonwealth where they can read in the Constitution that they're still discriminated against. And so I would just ask that, the broad scope of this constitutional amendment, that the legislature take the action to move this bill forward and to remove this discriminatory language from our Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Julianne Reed with the Virginia Civic Engagement Table. We believe this is a very important constitutional amendment. First of all, because we want our Constitution to be constitutional, but also because of basic human rights. Please move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome again.
Good morning. It's Carol Noggle. I'm speaking for myself. I have friends who are mothers whose sons have left Virginia, or from other states they've left for another country because they were not getting the dignity they felt they deserved because of their same-sex marriage.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Hope Mascada with the ACLU of Virginia. We support this bill. It's time for our Constitution in Virginia to actually be constitutional. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
I'm Diane Lasky, President of Virginia Now, and we support this bill also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Doug Chick with NEO. Didn't see the folks on the west side.
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chris Friend Family Foundation. I believe around 30 states adopted constitutional amendments defining marriage. As far as I can tell, none have removed it from their constitution. It's simply, right now, under the Supreme Court ruling, no law was passed under Supreme Court opinion, not enforceable. And California still has it on their constitution. No one is arguing California is not welcoming, so we would just encourage you, for the sake of the definition of marriage, to keep it where it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friend. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bill Ray with the Virginia Catholic Conference. We also oppose this, acknowledging that the Obergefell decision does apply to all 50 states. However, we continue to affirm our conviction that the definition of marriage is between one man and one woman, and I'd just like to note that that stance predates any other religion or government or anything like that. And again, the voters did affirm this back in 2006. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very simple. Any concluding remarks?
Well, I just find it interesting that religious people are opposed to equality. I mean, it's pretty amazing to me. And I do think that those other states will repeal their language. And let's say in a fantasy that the Supreme Court would reverse their decision, which President-elect said won't happen, but let's say they would a Federalist Society judge disallow Virginia from recognizing people that got married in another state? I think that's a fundamental constitutional principle that we recognize contracts from other states. So this is not going anywhere. This is just a matter of how we want to present ourselves to the public. Do we want to have an amendment that is so extreme as the one that's in our Constitution or not? So I want us to be a welcoming state, and one way we can do that is let the people have another chance to let their opinion be heard.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sickles. We have one more bill left on our agenda. I really appreciate the committee from going through it. Delegate Price, you have a constitutional amendment. You can present that from the table or the dais, your call. As she goes down to the podium, Delegate Price has a redistricting bill that is HJ 696, and that will be the last bill that comes before the subcommittee, and we appreciate your time. So Delegate Price, thank you for being here for 2.5 hours. Let's start your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members. As you know and as you've heard, currently the redistricting process here in Virginia allows for districts to be drawn based on political party, personal interest, along racial and ethnic lines and with little to no transparency. Virginia is ranked one of the most gerrymandered states in the country, based on the Governing Magazine's 2012 report, and not much has changed since then. Of 25 precincts in the 95th district, 6 are split, and 2 of those are split 3 ways. We have a chance to make safeguards against the negative impacts of gerrymandering and undermining our great democracy. HJ 696 directly addresses the scope of legislative privilege in the process of drawing district lines. It would prohibit districts being drawn for the purpose of favoring or disfavoring any political party, incumbent legislator or member of Congress, or potential candidate. It would go further to prohibit districts being drawn to restrict or deny the ability of any racial or language minority to participate in the political process and elect a preferred candidate of choice. And further, notwithstanding the provisions of Article 4, Section 9, HJ 696 would make any communication of or a document prepared by a legislator or legislative staff or constituent in the course of reapportionment public record. I agree with Delegate Plum's comments on communities of interest, so I will skip that part, and also urge transparency. Your allowing the citizens to weigh in on HJ 696 shows the citizens that the Commonwealth truly believes in the equal weight of each vote, that we embrace fairness, and that we acknowledge that transparency increases trust in the governmental processes. It may be uncomfortable for us to hear, but it is our duty to face our reality. We are in uncertain times as it pertains to justice and civil rights. When it is possible that a man who has been documented to be against the fight for civil rights may be appointed to being in charge of the organization that is to protect civil rights, uncertainty and fear thrive in communities that have historically been targeted. We can clear up that uncertainty, at least at the state level, by showing that we believe all Virginians have an equal vote. We can demonstrate that fairness and transparency are indeed part of our values. We can go beyond the bare minimum of reform and use unequivocal language in showing that we are committed to democracy for all. In closing, we can show that we have nothing to hide in our process as we draw lines for voting districts, show that we encourage increased voter participation, show that we stand with Virginians who want a fair chance to choose their representation. And I ask that we send forward HJ 696 to let people have their chance to weigh in on our redistricting process. My colleague Delegate Landis mentioned that the process we have thus far undergone was completely constitutional and legal, but yet here we are. So it goes to show that something must change. So I do appreciate what HJ 763 attempts to argue, that the citizens of the Commonwealth deserve to weigh in on their process. I just take that a step further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Delegate Price. Ably presented. Any questions for Delegate Price? Well, you know the drill, Delegate Price, that we'll be keeping this in the arms of the committee, and we'll be voting later in the session. See no questions, members of the subcommittee. We recognize anyone from the audience to speak in favor or against this bill. If you would introduce yourself. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kirk Jones, and today I represent the Central Virginia chapter of the Philip Randolph Institute. And for the sake of time, the subcommittee, I just want to say it would support HJ 696, and we thank Delegate Price for introducing it. Does add a measure of fairness and transparency to the code. Again, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being out here this morning. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Devin Welch. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm a small business owner. I'm here to speak on behalf of the bill introduced by Delegate Price. I think a lot of the reasoning behind the beginning of the bill, the first few measures, has already been echoed by, or has already been spoken to by other people here today. What I'd like to speak to is the transparency clause in it. I think that there's a trust deficit that's visible in the communities that I operate in around redistricting. And I think any solution to the redistricting process should include transparency measures in order to regain the public's trust in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Welcome back.
Thank you, Julie Emery, Virginia Civic Engagement Table. We strongly support this bill. Are especially pleased that it would protect so many communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Price, any concluding remarks? Thank you. I said this was the last bill, but I'm going to correct that. Chairman Cole has rejoined us, and Chairman Cole has a HJ 635 that is in our elections and voter registration category. Chairman Cole, you can present your bill from here or the podium, your choice.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I assume you already heard Delegate Rasul's
We did.
amendment. Mine is very similar to his, except that mine would only apply to statewide offices as far as the top two in a primary. I believe his would apply to pretty much everybody.
Correct.
Well, I think that's a good idea. I realize that in Virginia we tend to do things in smaller steps. There was a bill a few years ago, and this is due to the complaints from people about people being elected to office with less than 50% of the vote. And there was a bill that this committee passed out, I believe a year or two ago, that would require a runoff if that situation happened between the top two candidates. However, it died because of the cost associated with holding a runoff election. In order to mitigate that cost, I backed things up and would just have a kind of an open primary where the top two vote getters would be the people on the November ballot for the general election, and again, just for statewide offices.
Thank you, Chairman Cole. Any questions for Chairman Cole from members of the subcommittee? Any members of the audience care to address us concerning Chairman Cole's HJ 635? Seeing none, I'm going to commend the committee for 2.5 hours of work. Where we stayed over about 6 minutes in this room, so we're going to yield over to someone else, and we will determine whether or not our next meeting, which will be 1 week from today, will be at 7 or 8. We may want to have that time to make our decisions. So with that, the committee will rise.